presentation is going to be in two parts. Dr. Seals asked me to talk initially about the technologies that we use to acquire. It's coming. So this is the first part. What he asked me to talk about in this section is the technologies that we use for the data acquisition. And then in his talk, which will be after this, that I will also give, because he couldn't be here. He's really sorry that he had to leave. The second part will be about manipulating those data sets to do digital restoration. I'll try to stay on time. I'll move through this first section rather quickly. Okay, so what you see here is a film that was nominated for some Academy Awards this year, 127 Hours, starring James Franco. And this quote, he's talking about what kind of equipment and tools do I need to free me. He was alone, trapped in a slot canyon in southern Utah. And so that's kind of what I'm going to do in this first part, talk about what are the tools, what are the techniques that we need to free the images, the data from the physical restraints. If you look at the end of the quote, it says what he really needs, though, besides all these tools, is 8 strong men to do the heavy lifting. And when I think of 8 strong men to do all the hard work, I really think of Dr. Simon Lin, Dr. Liu, and Dr. Fan, and their teams. Because this video, that you noticed, was all about collaboration. And when you're not alone, when you collaborate, you can do great things. So let's get on to the technologies. I want to talk about 3 technologies that we use for the data acquisition. First of all, the camera system, multispectral. Then the method for obtaining the 3-dimensional model of the artifacts. And then thirdly, what we call reverse-side content extraction. Is how to discover hidden text on the back side of a page. So quickly, the camera system, high-definition camera system. Ryan talked about it in the video. It's a monochrome camera, no color filter. So you take many pictures using colored LED lights, multispectral lights, and then you can combine those different pictures, images in different ways to coax the features that you're interested in out of the image, or to create a natural light image as well. This is a picture of one of the LED panels and the light spectrum from ultraviolet to infrared. Saw this was in the similar thing in the video. This is the sequence where they're taking the pictures. This is, it's been speeded up. Some of the light spectrums, the exposure is very long. So you take the collection of those different light wave images and you can combine them in different ways, trying to find a feature you're interested in the artifact. This is a oracle bone replica from right here in the collection at Academia Sinica. So this is a variance image, skew image, different ways of combining the multispectral images. Line slope, line error, standard deviation, and finally a natural light, RGB image. If you look at the section that's highlighted there in detail, so this is the natural light image. You can see some of the Oracle script characters. Now if we go back to the line slope, you can see that line slope in this case makes them pop a little bit, helps isolate the Oracle script characters. And that could be used, and we'll talk a little bit about that in Dr. Steele's talk, later to do some kind of digital restoration or text manipulation enhancement. Same thing, we're still talking about the multispectral images. Here's a map from the collection of Dr. Fan right here at Academia Sinica. This is a natural light image that's been mapped on the 3D model, and we'll talk about the 3D model afterwards. And you saw in the video also, under a certain multispectral light combination, there's some features that really pop. Another example, this is from some work that Dr. Steele and his team did in Venice, the Marciano Library. This is a copy of the imaging of the Venetusae, Homer's Iliad. And here you can see, if you look in this area over here to the right, it's not really visible in natural light, but there was some notes in the margin. And under infrared, those notes are once again visible. One last example. This is another copy of Homer's Iliad. This is from the Escuela Library in Spain. And again, you have the natural light on the left and a multispectral image on the right. If you look at this empty space in the natural light image, and you can see that actually there's a couple diagrams that are now visible under multispectral imaging. Okay, so let's go on to the second. So now we've acquired a digital image. We have that data in many wavelengths. Now what we'd like to do is get the surface model acquisition. We want to get the 3D, three-dimensional model of the artifact that we're imaging. Dr. Seals has used a couple of methods for doing that. The first one I'll talk about is a commercial method. It's called a ferro arm, an industrial laser 3D scanner. And then afterwards we'll talk about a structured light scanner that they implemented at the Center for Visualization at the University of Kentucky. So here's the industrial ferro arm. It's a jointed arm with, and this one has a laser on it. It's non-contact. It gives very precise 3D modeling. And this is Matt Fields from the center in Venice, taking a 3D model of one of the pages of the Venetusae. Here he is, calibrating the device, and then he'll be taking the 3D model using the laser arm. Gives very good results. One of the inconvenient things about this is it's work intensive. It takes a lot of time to do the page and effort for the person, concentration. And if you have hundreds of pages to digitize and you also want the 3D model, it slows down the workflow. And a lot of times, conservators, they don't want these precious manuscripts to be out of their controlled environment or under the lights for long periods of time. So this has worked very well, but Dr. Seals wanted another method that was faster and that could integrate into the workflow, wasn't so labor intensive. So they developed, and this is what we used in Spain at Escuela Library and also here at Academia Sinica last year. It's called structured light scanning. I'm going to go very quickly over the technology, but it's a lot like stereo vision. You can go to the movie and watch something in 3D. Instead of two images to create the 3D model, you use one camera image and a projector that projects a known pattern. And you can calculate, triangulate the distances, and calculate the depth map. So here's a point cloud that's generated using that method. Here's an example that we did here at Academia Sinica on the oracle bone replica. The projector projects a known pattern, and the camera digitizes that and then calculates the distances. And this is a result. This is an application that allows you to view a 3D model. Come up. Didn't come up. There it is. Okay. This is a 3D model of the oracle bone replica. And a researcher can manipulate it in space, zoom in and out. You could actually texture, this one's texture mapped with the natural light image, but you could put one of the multispectral images on this model. So that now we've done two types of data acquisition, the digital image with the multispectral, the 3D modeling, and now let's talk about reverse side content extraction. As Dr. Leo said in the video, in your collection here at Academia Sinica, you have some books, original bindings in good shape. There's hidden text on the backside of the pages that are not accessible. So Dr. Seals with Dr. George Landon at the University of Eastern Kentucky, and with Dr. Clark, who Brett went back to talk at his funeral. They developed this method. So the idea is when light passes through a page or some kind of material, the light is diffused and scattered. And you can use that information with a camera to, for each pixel, decide, is there ink on the top, is there ink on the bottom, or no ink? Or is there ink on the top and the bottom of the page? So I'm going to skip over some of this for time reasons, but I think I'll give you a demonstration that will help you. So you have an active backlight, you have a camera, and then you have the document itself. I'll skip over the detailed description of the techniques. Here's an example from the research. Here we have a page front side, and you can see through there's back text as well in drawing. This is the actual image of the back side of the page. This is what, with the method, they were able to extract. It's the attenuation, how this light passed through the page. And using the algorithms, this is, let me just turn it over there, here at the bottom, this is what they guessed was on the back of the page. And you can see it looks very good compared to what was really on the back of the page. And here's the difference, the subtraction of the two, and it's very close. So you can get good results just from one side, even though we don't have good access to the back of that page. Let me skip this. Okay, so here's an example that we did last year at Academia Sinica. This is a page from a copy, it's Yuan Dynasty. It's the annotated Analects of Confucius by Zhu Xi, but there's text on the back. And you can see, this is the front, and you can see there's a little bleed through, you can see there's something on the back of this page. So using Dr. Seals, Landon, and Clark's technique, we're going to try to extract the back text. Okay, the difficulty here was because of constraints in the pages, we can't really put a monitor or some kind of active display behind it. We could only put a very thin, paper-thin, light, flexible light page. So the results aren't quite as good. The next step in this method is to put in a very thin, flexible, organic LED display, and that way we can do active backlighting. And it will give us much better results. But here's the results we got. This is a little animation. So front of the page, the backlight, you can see a lot of the reverse text there. You run the algorithm, to isolate the back text. We're going to flip it so that it's readable. And you can see that this is the back text, and it is readable. And we know we can get better quality with an active backlight. Okay, so that's the summary of the first part, the tools to acquire the data. So now Dr. Seal's keynote is, now that we have this information, what kind of interesting, innovative digital restoration can we do on these objects with this information? Go to his presentation. This is Dr. Seal's keynote. Right, so now we're going to talk about digital restoration. We know conventional restoration is what the curators do. They fix the tears, they reframe, they clean up, they touch up, they repair the damage, which is all important. But what we want to try to do here, and what we want to talk about in this talk, is what we call digital restoration. It's taking all these data that we have, and what kind of manipulation, restoration, enhancement can we do on the documents, the artifacts. It's interesting for curators too, because all this digital restoration, there's no danger of damage. When the curator brings the piece out, anytime it's brought out, there's always a possibility that it could be damaged. Right? But when you're doing digital restoration, if you do something wrong, you just go back to the original copy of the digital data and try again. Okay, so we already talked about acquisition, so now we're going to talk about manipulation of the data. What kind of algorithms can we use to restore or enhance a digital artifact? And then lastly, he's going to talk about, once we have this digital artifact or restoration, how can we present it to the user? Because it's all about the user. How does he want to experience this digital restoration? This is the roadmap for the talk. Talk about digital flattening. We saw a little bit of that in the video. Spectral enhancement. We already looked at a little bit of that as well in the first talk. And then we're going to talk about registration. Registration is aligning things, like if you align maps with a sideline image, or if you align what he calls diachronic registration is through time. So if you have an old image of a manuscript and a new image of the manuscript, how can you align those? It's difficult to align if you don't take the photo at the same time, because the camera moves, the camera's different, the lens is different, the lighting, the document might shift. And then we'll talk a little bit about text transformation as a digital restoration. The displays, we'll talk about some applications he has on an iPad we have here to display these kinds of restorations. And big displays that you can use in a theater like this. Okay, so to put the man behind the talk, I brought some images of Dr. Seal's from last year's TELDAP conference so that you can visualize him giving this talk. So there he is. There it is, from last year. If you need more information, you're welcome to come to the Visualization Center's website, is.uky.edu. Okay, so let's talk about a restoration, digital restoration technique called digital flattening. We already saw the acquisition of the image, acquisition of the 3D model. So now let's manipulate that 3D model to flatten an image. What happens is you have these manuscripts that are on parchment, animal skin, and over time the skin dies, dries up, it cockles, you get waves. If the conservator tries to flatten that, if he tries to iron it or soak it, he's going to damage it. So this is a way to flatten those kind of manuscripts or maps without damaging the original. So this is a software they wrote to flatten images. This is a 3D map from the collection of Dr. Fan. Zoom in a little bit. So we have a 3D model, and then using a physical simulation, it's called a mass spring simulation. You can flatten it. Here I'll say flatten. Unflatten again. Whoops. So it's interesting when it's close like this. You can see at the end it kind of jiggles because it's a simulation of springs until it settles into a flattened state. One more time. Here we can show the mass points and then the springs. As it flattens in. Same thing with the, you can map whatever we have with 3D image, and we have the multiple images, so we can, of course, also flatten that. So that's one digital restoration. We took a map that's not flat or a manuscript, and we're able to digitally restore it to a flattened state. And that flattened state is important when you do registration, which we'll see later. Which we'll see next. So registration is, you're going to line up things, try to get them to line up so that you can compare them before and after. It could be compare in time or compare infrared to natural light, things like that. It's interesting for conservators because they want to see what's happening to my artifact. How is it changing over time? You can think of it in the medical area. What if you had an X-ray? Well, it's hard to tell, is that spot, was that always there, is that new? If you could line them up perfectly, and then over time, you could see that's a new spot. Here's an example from Venice. Well, it's pretty obvious side by side that there's been a major change. The first one on the left is early facsimile, 1900. About 100 years later, we did this one on the right, and you can tell that this manuscript is fading, this detail. Sometimes, though, to see subtle changes, it's important to line them up perfectly to see what has changed. Here's an example, digitizing the Iliad. We didn't notice there was a thumbprint on the back of the camera, and I think you can see a little bit of the noise from the thumbprint. And they took about 160 pages and 3D model before they realized there's a problem. Let's see, so they had to go back, of course. The one on the left has a thumbprint, the one on the right does not, but because of time constraints, they couldn't go back and redo the 3D model. They could only go back and do the 3D image. Well, now we have a problem because the new image doesn't line up with the 3D model. So this is why they wrote this alignment software, is we're going to line up the new image with the old one, and then it's going to fit the 3D model. Okay, here you have the two of them, the subtraction, and you can see the text is not lined up. You can also see the noise from the thumbprint. Noise from the thumbprints on the left. Their algorithm notices all, it uses features in the text to find out where are the alignment points, and it creates this mesh. And you'll notice that the mesh is where the text is. There's not a lot of mesh where there's not text. Okay, so here the text is aligned. I'm going to fade from the old image, the thumbprint image, to the new image, but this time it's aligned. And if you look closely at the text, it should line up, it shouldn't move as we fade. Okay, and it stays in the same spot, but the thumbprint is gone. Okay, we have some other examples from Dead Sea Scrolls. We have a 1950s infrared image, then a modern day infrared, and then a modern day natural light, and they've aligned those as well. I'm going to not go through all the examples for time reason. I'd like to show you the algorithm. And These are also Dead Sea Scroll aligned images from the 1950s and modern. Okay, so this one's going to give you an idea of the algorithm. What we have is it will fade in from the natural light to an infrared, and you'll notice as it fades in, the text is not aligned. The algorithm is going to run, and you'll see it trying to do the rigid alignment, align the text, and then it's going to do the elastic alignment, kind of do the warping. And when it fades back in, they should be aligned. So let me run it. Okay, so it faded, they're not aligned, the text. Algorithm runs, it's trying to do the rigid alignment. And then at the end, it stretches. There you go. Now it's going to fade back in, they should be aligned. And they are. Let's run it one more time. It's kind of a cool effect, I think. Not aligned, it jiggles, trying to align up all the feature points in the text, the rigid ones. And then once it has the mesh, it stretches, warps it to the correct position so that the text is aligned. There we go. So another way of data manipulation, another way to visualize this data is, this is a vector field. This shows us how do things have to move in order to be aligned. So the red area is where things had to move a lot, and the blue area is where things had to move very little. So you can see all the movement was over here, less movement over here, and at the bottom. This kind of presentation, you can call it a digital restoration. It's a digital interpretation of an artifact. This is of interest to conservators. They want to know is my document changing, and if he sees this, they want to know why is it changing at that spot, what's the problem? Okay, so we've done registration, alignment, we've done flattening. Let's talk quickly about a new area that Dr. Seals is very interested in. This is called text transformation. The idea is you have these manuscripts, they're in a language, maybe they're in Latin, maybe they're in Oracle bone script. And when you translate those from ancient to modern or from modern to another modern language, a lot of times you lose the beauty of the object because it's usually going to be just a text translation. And what we want to try to do is how can we keep the style, the design, the layout, the beauty of the original manuscript, but make it accessible to people who don't speak the language. Lost in translation, that was his title, right? It's the title from the film, but a lot of times you lose the beauty when you translate it. Just quickly on this, there's certain kinds of documents that are easy to aesthetically transform, keeping the beauty, and others are more difficult. He's interested in this area in the middle, illuminated manuscripts, printed material, early block script. So here's how the model works. If you look at this diagram on the left, this is what usually happens. You have an original document. This is a detail from the Oracle one, replica. So you're going to find the text in that, and you're going to translate that text, say, to modern characters, and usually that's the end of the story, right? But we kind of lose the beauty of this object. So what he wants to do is continue the loop and create a digital restoration that retains the beauty of the original document. And here's a good example, another example. This is an early Christian manuscript. It's written in Latin that they digitized in England last summer. Well, I don't read Latin, neither does Dr. Seals, but we can see there's some beautiful stuff in this writing. It's like this V it's decorated. And we'd like to kind of, for a user, we want to keep this experience, not just translate it. So what we're going to do just on these two lines, we're going to isolate them, remove the Latin, but keep the same background, keep the stains on the manuscript, the color of the manuscript. And if you look at these two lines, you can see now these are in English, if you look carefully. It says, "The voice of one crying in the wilderness, prepare ye the way of the Lord." And notice that for the V of voice, they kept the decorated letter. Okay, so the idea is, how can we automate this? How can we do this where other users